Bhagavatam. My question for you today is this: do demons exist? Do angels exist? Does God exist? Hollywood has done a great job of creating demons with scary faces, horrific sounds, and supernatural powers. Any sensible or rational person would ridicule such nonsense and dismiss it. Yet millions of people are drawn to horror movies. Why is that? Could it be that despite what intellectuals think, despite scientific advancement, somewhere deep down in our subconscious, we know that there is some truth in all this talk about God and angels and demons? The reality is that science does not know or understand much. It thinks it does. We believe science is the be-all and end-all of everything, and that it knows everything, and we are beholden to it. At the same time, there are things that we know unconsciously that make no sense to our logical minds. But frankly, my dear, it doesn't matter what any of us think or believe. I did not believe in evil or demons or angels or any of these things. And yet, when I began my practice as a hypnotherapist, I came across a phenomenon that repeated itself again and again. I began to call it the darkness. It would pop up its ugly head, and whenever I tried to take a client into a deep state of regression, it would show up. I began to interview this darkness, and each time I found that it had the same intention, the same strategy, the same end game. It wanted to sabotage and destroy the person. It did this by telling them that they were worthless, not good enough, and unlovable. And it would be better if they ended their life. I'm not exaggerating here. This is exactly what the end conclusion of my conversations would be. If I could draw out the essence of what it was about trying to do, this was it. I found it in everyone. Perhaps you've heard a voice in your head saying, "You're worthless. You're not good enough. You're unlovable." I made a whole video about this, and it's on my YouTube channel, Spiritual Wisdom Academy. You can find me there, or just by typing in my name. And it's titled Mind Virus, the Bully in Your Head. If we do not have a true understanding of spirituality and God, then the voices in our heads will seek to control us. And if we let them, they will attempt to get us to sabotage our lives, harm others, and even kill ourselves. I've seen this at very close quarters, and I've seen this in hundreds of people. So when I hear about the stories of Krishna, the Supreme Being or God, appearing on this planet around 5500 BCE, I tend to give it a measure of perhaps trust, openness, consideration. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, that is Krishna, that he's come to destroy the demonic forces that had spread their influence throughout our planet, to establish dharma or spiritual principles, and to love and give love to his and pleasure to his devotees. And in that same Bhagavad Gita, he defines what a demonic person is in chapter 18. No, it's not a person with some horns, and it's not got a red face, but he defines demonic people as those who have pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and are ignorant of their true spiritual self. They do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness, nor proper behavior, nor truth is found in them. They say that this world is unreal. It was not created by anyone, and there is no God in control. Taking shelter of insatiable lust and desire, absorbed in the conceit of pride and false prestige, they engage in unclean work, attracted by the impermanent. They believe that gratifying the senses is the prime necessity of human civilization. Thus their anxiety is immeasurable until the end of life. Bound by a network of hundreds of thousands of desires and absorbed in lust and anger, they secure money by any means to gratify their senses. Such a person thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future, more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemies will also be killed. I am the Lord of everything. I am the enjoyer. I am perfect, powerful, and happy. I am the richest person, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There is none so powerful and happy as I am, and thus I shall rejoice. In this way, such persons are deluded by ignorance. They have no intelligence and are lost to their true spiritual self. As a result, they engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. Have you come across such people? Do you read about them in the news? Do you come across them in your life? They're all around us, aren't they? So once you hear this definition, now answer the question, do demons exist? The correct answer might be a resounding yes, everywhere, in all of us and all around us. What can we do? How can we fight such forces? Most people have been led to believe that all they need to do is be good. Good is not the antidote for evil. We must understand who we are and who is God. Then, through yoga or union with the divine, with God, we must become united with the greatest power of all. As Christ said, I and the Father are one. The same thing is said by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, surrender unto me, and I will free you from all karma, from all your sinful acts, and I will bring you back to me. I will liberate you. The easiest way to become one with God is by loving God, by surrendering to Him and aligning our will to His will. Now, we've talked about this idea of God and who is God and what is God and all of that in earlier episodes of the Bhagavatam, so I won't go into it today. But today we'll touch on something further. And that is that as we align ourselves with the divine, or God, whatever name you want to call it, we develop divine qualities. And this is the symptom of truly being there. Because without these qualities, you aren't aligned. You're just imagining things. You're just believing things. But when you believe, when something is real, you will have real symptoms. Symptoms such as fearlessness, symptoms such as generosity, self-control, simplicity, nonviolence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, detachment from material things, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living entities, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, courage, cleanliness, and freedom from greed, envy, and self-importance. These are the qualities that begin to develop within us when we truly align ourselves with God. To understand this better, let us return to Krishna's life as a young boy in the village of Vrindavan. So, as I was saying earlier, let us begin, or rather resume, the pastimes of Krishna as we've been reading in the earlier episodes in the Bhagavatam. Today we're going to hear about Kaliya. Once Krishna went to the Yamuna river with his friends, but this time he went without his brother Balaram. Balaram is no different than Krishna. Actually, he is equally the supreme being and is always with him. But today, Balaram didn't come along. The summer sun was hot, and when they reached the river, the boys and the cows, being very thirsty, began drinking the river water. But the river had been contaminated with poison. So this is, Krishna used to go with his friends, the boys of the village, and they would take care of the cows. They would take them out to pasture, and after they fed them, they'd bring them back, at the end of the day. But today, they went to the river to drink water, and it had been contaminated. And as soon as they touched the poisoned water, all the cows and boys lost their consciousness and fell lifeless at the water's edge. In other words, they died. Seeing them in such a condition, Krishna, the master of all mystics, felt compassion for his beloved devotees and his friends who trusted him implicitly. So what did he do? He immediately brought them back to life by showering his nectarian glance upon them. Regaining their full consciousness, the boys and cows stood up out of the water and began to look at one another in great astonishment. They realized that although they had drunk poison and had died, simply by the merciful glance of Krishna, they had regained their lives and were able to stand up by their own strength. You might wonder, who is this Krishna we're talking about if you're just joining us for the first time? So here are some pictures for you. This is Krishna as a boy when he's in Vrindavan and taking care of the cows and calves. No, not God sitting in the clouds, not some old man with a beard, but rather someone absolutely stunning and beautiful. Look at his eyes, look at his smile. How beautiful and gorgeous he is. Look at how loving and kind and compassionate he is with all the animals, with the cows, with the birds, with the peacocks, with all his friends. So that's Krishna for you. And if you understand that God doesn't have to be limited by our thinking, he can be anything he wants to be. He can be male and female. He can be anything he feels like. And you say, well, how can God look like this? Well, why not? And as we're talking about the story here, this is where Krishna's friends had died, and then he brought them back to life again. And they're like, oh, wow, what just happened? Because they'd all died from drinking the poison in the river. In the background in that picture, you will see Kaliya. So the Yamuna River had been contaminated by the black poisonous snake Kaliya. Krishna was aware of this, and he had in fact come to the river to purify its waters and banish Kaliya. When the river Yamuna, within the river Yamuna was a lake inhabited by the serpent Kaliya for many, many ages. The serpent's fiery breath constantly heated and boiled the waters. The vapors thus created were so poisonous that birds flying over the contaminated lake would fall down into it. The wind blowing over that deadly lake carried droplets of water to the shore, and simply by coming in contact with that poisonous breeze, all vegetation and creatures on the shore died. Krishna saw how the Kaliya serpent had polluted the Yamuna river with his terribly powerful poison. Since Krishna had descended from the spiritual world specifically to subdue envious demons, he immediately climbed on the top of a very high Kadamba tree and he prepared himself for battle. So how did he do that? He tightened his belt, he slapped his arms, and then he jumped into the poisonous water. Let's take a little look at what that looks like. In fact, you can find till this day the very tree that Krishna climbed on in Vrindavan. There it is. Of course, they've built stuff around it now just to, create a monument or a memorial, how to memorialize it. But that's the tree that he climbed on top of and that jumped into the river Yamuna. The river bed now is dried up. The Yamuna River has moved away from this spot where it used to be. And they've also further sort of memorialized it by creating this structure. I couldn't find any pictures of Krishna climbing the tree, but what I did find is this cute little cartoon, just to give you an idea. And there's Kaliya in the water. So when the Supreme God had landed in the serpent's lake, so that's what he did. He climbed on the tree and then he jumped into the lake, knowing that there was a poisonous snake there that his friends had died from. And he brought them back to life, of course. So what he did was, he jumped into the water, and the snakes who accompanied Kaliya became very extremely agitated, and they began breathing heavily, further polluting it with volumes of poison. The force of Krishna's entrance into the lake caused it to overflow on all sides. and poisonous waves flooded the surrounding lands. Now you might say, this is kind of strange. Why would a little boy falling into a lake cause the lake to overflow? But that's not at all amazing, because Krishna was the supreme being and he possessed infinite strength. Krishna then began sporting, or rather playing, in Kaliya's lake like a powerful elephant, swirling his mighty arms and making the water resound. When Kaliya heard these sounds, he understood that someone was trespassing in his lake. The serpent could not tolerate this and immediately came forward. Now, you'll notice in the stories of Krishna, there are many characters who are referred to as demonic, and they take various forms. There was Putana, who came, was a witch kind of character who came to poison Krishna. There was Aghasura, who came in the form of a gigantic serpent as well. There were so many different types of entities. Now, how is it that they took these forms, and why were they able to change form and become whatever it is they wanted to be? This is a bit of a secret, and I need to explain it to you. You see, in ancient yogic practices, one of the siddhis, the sort of attainments that a person could have, was that they could take on any form. They could go anywhere. They could get anything. These are called the Ashta Siddhis, the 8 different kind of siddhis. We've talked about it in an earlier episode, so I'm not going to detail it here. But the main point was they could take any form. Now, these siddhis, or these mystical powers, were available to those who were good and saintly, and they were also available to those who were demonic. Ravan was one of those demonic beings. He had asked for all kinds of boons through his austerities and practices, that he could not be killed by this or by that, in so many different means. Hiranyakashipu had done the same thing. So often when great power is achieved by those who have ill intention, they will misuse it to harm others. We see this even till today. And the same was true back then, except that they could then avail of these yogic powers and siddhis, which were meant to be for good, but they would then abuse that. See, there's all kinds of people in the world. They will take that which is good and use it for evil. And so that is the case with most of these demons, and they were coming to attack Krishna because whenever there is someone who is saintly, someone who is divine, and especially if that someone is God, they're going to want to kill that saintly person or that divine being because it gives them great pleasure to do so. They anyway take pleasure in enjoying harming others, but if that being is a highly evolved soul or is God himself appearing, all the more reason they're going to want to harm that being. But Krishna shows how even despite the fact that they were coming to kill him, despite the fact that he was just a young boy, 5 years old, 6, 7, like that, he would just kill them in an instant. But he would have some fun doing it. And that's what we're looking at over here. So let's continue. Kaliya is the serpent demon. Kaliya saw that Krishna was wearing yellow silken garments, and he appeared very delicate. His attractive body was shining like a glowing white cloud. His face was smiling and beautiful, and his feet resembled a lotus flower. Krishna was playing fearlessly in the water. The envious Kaliya furiously bit him on the chest and then completely enwrapped him in his coils. When the members of the cowherd community who had accepted Krishna as their dearest friend saw him enveloped in the snake's coils, motionless, they were greatly disturbed. They had given Krishna everything, their life, their families, their wealth, their wives, and all pleasures. And seeing him in the clutches of the Kaliya snake, their intelligence became deranged by grief, lamentation, and fear, and they fell to the ground. The cows, bulls, and calves, in great distress, cried out piteously to Krishna. Fixing their eyes on him, they stood still in fear, as if ready to cry, but too shocked to shed tears. Fearful omens appeared on the earth. in the sky and on the bodies of living creatures announcing imminent danger. It's interesting how omens are talked about, not only here in the Vedic literatures, in the Bhagavatam, but I've even read of such things in Shakespeare and various other authors. Today these things might still be happening, but we don't seem to notice them, nor do we have any particular understanding of how nature works, sometimes to warn us, sometimes to prepare us. It's happened in times of the tsunami, I heard, where the animals picked up on the fact that the tsunami was coming in areas like Bangkok and so on, wherever it came early on in the early 2000s. But the humans didn't pick up on it. But in earlier times, they were very sensitized. Ancient tribes, ancient people were very sensitized to nature, so they could pick up on these inauspicious omens. So when the people in Vrindavan noticed these inauspicious omens, Krishna's father, King Nanda, and the cowherd men became very fearful. They knew that Krishna had gone to herd the cows that day without his elder brother Balaram. And because they were so devoted to Krishna and he was their life, but they didn't know anything about his great power and opulence. They feared that the inauspicious omens indicated that he was going to meet with death, and they were overwhelmed with grief and lamentation and fear. All these poor, suffering people rushed out of their village intent upon finding Krishna. Krishna's brother Balaram, who is an expansion of Krishna himself and therefore no different than him, he's also the Supreme Being, the master of all transcendental knowledge, he knew. Krishna's brother Balaram was back in the village. He hadn't gone out with Krishna, if you remember. But he was not worried. He smiled and said nothing. And when he saw everyone in such distress, because he knew the extraordinary power of his younger brother, he didn't say anything. They all hurried towards the bank of the Yamuna in great haste to search for their dearest Krishna by following the path marked by his footprints, which were marked with the lotus flower, barley corn, an elephant goad, a thunderbolt, and flags. In other words, Krishna's feet had all kinds of markings on them by which you could know that, oh, this is Krishna who had been walking here. So let me give you a couple of pictures here that are so interesting. This is Krishna and his brother Balaram. And you see they're always surrounded by beautiful animals because they're there to protect them, not harm them, not eat them, not devour them like cannibals, like animals. And those are the markings of his feet. So when they reached the banks of the river Yamuna, from a distance, they were able to see that Krishna was in the lake, motionless within the coils of the black serpent. And the cowherd boys, his friends, had all fallen unconscious, and the cows were crying out for Krishna. Seeing all of this, the residents of Vrindavan were overwhelmed with anguish and confusion. When the young gopis, the cowherd women, girls, whose minds were constantly attached to Krishna, saw him in the grip of the coils of the serpent, they remembered his loving friendship, his smiling glances, and his talks with them. Burning with great sorrow, they felt the entire universe as void. See, this is called love. And this is not a love that is imposed out of fear. This is a love that is caused by the smiling glances of the divine. God is not just some fearful being sitting up there judging people and wanting them to deciding whether someone goes to heaven or goes to hell. God is the ultimate lover, the ultimate romantic, the ultimate friend. And that's what you see in here. Although the elder gopis, the elder women of the village, were feeling just as much distress and were sobbing profusely, but at the same time they were trying to forcibly hold back Krishna's mother, whose consciousness was totally absorbed in her son. Now, what were they looking at? Do you remember? Let me remind you again. They were seeing Krishna being held by this gigantic snake in its arms, holding him. And so they were all standing like corpses with their eyes fixed upon his face. The gopis each took turns recounting the pastimes of the darling of Braj. Krishna's father Nanda and the other cowherd men began entering the serpent's lake, but Balaram, Krishna's brother, fully knew Krishna's actual power and therefore restrained them. This is the sight they saw. Krishna being held by the serpent Kaliya with his many hoods and his many, many mouths. And there he was, paralyzed. What would happen if you saw your loved one in this condition? Would you be terrified? Krishna remained for some time within the coils of the serpent, imitating the behavior of an ordinary mortal. But when he understood that the women, children, and other residents of Vrindavan were in acute distress because of their love for him, and because he was their only shelter and goal in life, he began to expand his body. As Kaliya, the snake's coils, experienced great torment by the expanding body of Krishna, Kaliya released him. In great anger, the serpent then raised his hoods high and stood still, breathing heavily. His nostrils breathed poison, and his eyes appeared to be glowing like firebrands, like coal. Again and again, Kaliya licked his lips with his bifurcated tongues, and as he stared at Krishna with a glance full of terrible poisonous fire, but Krishna playfully circled around him, just as an eagle playfully attacks a snake. Kaliya too began to move about, looking for an opportunity to bite Krishna. Having severely depleted the serpent's strength, so it reminds me of a boxing match where the boxer is moving from one point to the other, just kind of like not letting that punch land. Right? So having severely depleted the serpent's strength with his relentless circling, Krishna, the origin of everything, pushed down Kaliya's raised shoulders and mounted his broad serpentine heads. Thus Shri Krishna, the original master of all fine arts, began to dance, his lotus feet deeply reddened by the touch of the numerous jewels on the serpent's heads. Seeing Krishna dancing, the demigods immediately arrived there, and with great pleasure they accompanied his dancing by playing drums and singing powerful songs and showering flowers on him. Let's go to the scene that occurred. There's Krishna dancing on Kaliya's hoods, like a professional dancer. And Kaliya is stunned. With each step, Krishna is squashing his heads. With each step, it feels as if Kaliya is being pushed down towards the ground with a huge weight. And Krishna gracefully, enjoying himself with every step, is turning this great monster into a weak and creature, making him lose his power. Kaliya had 101 prominent heads, and when one of them would not bow down, Krishna, who inflicts punishment on cruel wrongdoers, would smash that stubborn head by striking it with his feet. Then as Kaliya entered his death throes, he began wheeling his heads around and vomiting ghastly blood from his mouths and nostrils. The serpent thus experienced extreme pain and misery. Exuding poisonous waste from his eyes, Kaliya would occasionally dare to raise up one of his heads, which would breathe heavily with anger. Then Krishna would dance on it and subdue it, forcing it to bow down with his foot. Krishna's wonderful, powerful dancing trampled and broke all of Kaliya's hoods. Then the serpent, profusely vomiting blood from his mouth, finally recognized Krishna to be the eternal supreme Godhead, the supreme master of all moving and non-moving beings, Narayan. Thus, within his mind, Kaliya took shelter of him. Kaliya was actually a great soul. When Kaliya's wives saw how the serpent had become so fatigued from the excessive weight of Krishna, who carries the entire universe in his abdomen, and how Kaliya's umbrella-like hoods had been shattered by the striking of Krishna's heels, Kaliya's wives experienced great distress. With their clothing, ornaments, and hair scattered in disarray, they approached the eternal personality of Godhead. Their minds were very much disturbed. These saintly ladies placed their children before them and then bowed down to the Lord of all creatures, laying their bodies flat upon the ground. They desired the liberation of their sinful husband and the shelter of the Supreme Lord, the giver of ultimate shelter. And thus they folded their hands in supplication and approached him. Perhaps I should show you the scene first. Just different artists depicting the same idea. So the wives of Kaliya, the serpent said, this punishment, the punishment for this offender has been subjected to is certainly just. In other words, the punishment that Kaliya is receiving is certainly just. After all, you have incarnated within this world to curb envious and cruel persons. You are so impartial that you look equally upon your enemies and your own sons. For when you impose a punishment on a living being, you know it to be for his ultimate benefit. This is a very different idea than what you come across in other religions where they talk about God punishing people and sending them to hell. But that is not the case here. When Krishna is dealing with any kind of punishment for someone, it is with a very clear and implicit intent that this is for the ultimate benefit of the person, to break their ego, to break their false illusions, to break their envy, and to bring them back to a place where the heart is softened, where we're able to love, where we're able to come and reclaim our divine self. That's the intent. It is not to hurt or harm someone, even though that might be the process. So when we go through our experiences in life, where we experience some kind of hurt or harm or pain, know that this is our karma, not Krishna. Krishna doesn't directly get involved in all our business. No, not at all. But that is our karma, and that karma is designed to bring us to this place of humility, to this place where we can truly call out to God, to this place where we can truly go into a place of surrender and alignment. Because in that place of alignment is true power, is true peace, is true happiness. But we don't realize that. We think it's by our deeds, by our activities, by our achievements, by our wealth, by our power, by our fame, and this is our illusion. His attempt is to bring us closer to him, because there we will find everything we've been looking for. The wives of Kaliya continue. What you have done here is actually mercy for us, since the punishment you give to the wicked certainly drives away all their contamination, the contamination of the ego. Indeed, because this conditioned soul, our husband, is so sinful that he has assumed the body of a serpent, your anger toward him is obviously to be understood as your mercy. Did he, our husband, perform great austerities in a previous life with his mind free of pride and full of respect for others? Is that why you are pleased with him? That you are giving him this benediction of your mercy, of your lotus feet that have graced his head and are dancing there? Is that why you, the life of all living beings, are now satisfied with him? Why are they saying satisfied with him? Because of this. We do not know how he has attained this great blessing of being touched by the dust of your feet. Even Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, performed austerities for centuries, giving up all other desires and observing austere vows just to have the blessings of the touch of your lotus feet. Those who have attained the dust of your feet never hanker for wealth, power, the perfections of yoga, or even liberation from this material world. There must be some immense power in those feet, don't you think? There must be some immense gift and blessing that is even greater than liberation from all the miseries of this world. There must be something so nectarian and powerful, so immensely healing, that great sages would even not care for all the perfections of yoga, would not hanker for wealth or power. How incredible must the feet of Krishna be? Although Kaliya, the king of serpents, is controlled by anger and the mode of ignorance, he has achieved that which is difficult for others to achieve. Embodied souls who are full of desires and are thus wandering in the cycle of birth and death can have everything they desire simply by receiving the dust of your lotus feet. We offer our obeisances unto you, O Supreme Godhead, although present in the hearts of all living beings as the Supersoul, yet you are all pervasive. Although you are the original shelter of all created material elements, yet you exist prior to their creation. And although you are the cause of everything, you are transcendental to all material cause and effect. You are the absolute truth, the reservoir of transcendental consciousness and potency, and the possessor of unlimited energies. Although completely free of material qualities, you are the primal cause of material nature. Obeisance unto you who are time itself. You are the universe and its creator. We offer our obeisances unto you, the omniscient personality of Godhead, who are always fixed in unchanging transcendence. You are distinct from the material universal creation, and yet you are the basis on which the illusion of material creation evolves, and also the witness of this illusion. Indeed, you are the root cause of the entire world. It's a big major point here, that he is the cause of this maya, this illusion that we are all bewildered by. This world that appears so real, these pleasures that appear so real, these desires that make us work all our life, are actually nothing, because there is nothing here. That which appears solid, this body, our house, our car, is just atoms in space, and not even is it atoms. You may think, oh, that it's 1% solid mass and 99% it is just air. But no, it's not even the 1% solid mass of atoms and protons, because even those are waves. And those waves are actually energy. And that energy is actually the energy of God, taking these incredible shapes. It's a virtual world that we live in. We live in a virtual reality. It appears to be real, but it is not. And the Bhagavatam, the sages of that time, thousands of years ago, they knew it. They could see through the veil, through the illusion, and they could understand that everything that people are doing in this world is for nothing. Everything that we hanker for is ignorance. Everything that we desire is foolishness. All the pleasures that we seek are passing and are taking away our life energy, are taking away all that we've been so fortunate to have and receive. All of this needs to be used to understand who we are and who is God, and to build a loving relationship, as you will see with these people and how they do it. That's why we have these examples here. So then they say, O Supreme Lord, please be merciful. It is proper for the saintly to feel compassion. This serpent is about to give up his life. Please give us back our husband, who is our life and soul. Please tell us, your maidservants, what we should do. Certainly anyone who faithfully executes your order is automatically freed from all fear. Thus the wives of Kaliya praised the Supreme Godhead, who then released the serpent Kaliya, who had fallen unconscious, his heads battered by the striking of the Supreme Lord's lotus feet. Kaliya slowly regained his vital force and sensory functions. Then, breathing loudly and painfully, the poor serpent addressed Krishna in humble submission. Think about this. How much don't we experience this kind of thing too? where we're beaten down by the circumstances of our life. And sometimes those circumstances are so hard and heavy and painful that we may think life is not worth living. Many will try to escape. Others will try to commit suicide. Others will turn to addiction. But what if we took those difficult situations and turned them into prayer, turned them into submission, turned them into surrender, turned them into a calling out to God and saying, hey, I'm not able to do this life by myself. This is too difficult. Please help me. And you know what? You will get reciprocation. You will feel and experience God's presence within you. I'm not the first person to say this. Millions have experienced it. Of course, they're just looking for a solution to their material desires. But the idea is not to solve your problems. The idea is to build that connection. That connection is real. That connection is timeless. That connection no one can take away from you once you have it. Kalia said, our very birth as a snake has made us envious, ignorant, and constantly angry. It is so difficult for people to give up their conditioned nature by which they identify with that which is unreal. O Supreme Creator, it is you who generate this universe. Among all the species within your material creation, we serpents are by nature always enraged. How can we possibly give up this anger on our own? You are the omniscient Lord of the universe, the cause of freedom from illusion. Please arrange for us whatever you consider proper, whether it be mercy or punishment. This is called surrender. This is called, I submit to your will. I have so many flaws. I'm not able to give them up. Please help me. I have so many anarthas, impurities, desires, bad habits, so many things that I know I shouldn't do, but I do. Please help me. And if you are sincere, that call will be answered. If you are sincere, those impurities will be cleansed. Because you're not alone. You're not alone in this world. That's the problem with people who are either atheists or impersonalists, those who believe in the impersonal energy of the divine and think that they want to have that connection. By all means, do that. But that energy leaves you on your own. You got to do the work, as most people say. But when you have a divine being that you can turn to, who is the embodiment of that energy, who is the place where you're supposed to go to connect with that energy. You see, if you go to the possessor of the energy, the divine being who is the source of that energy, then you have come to the place where everything is possible. Then all those impurities within the heart, those imperfections, those flaws, those desires will be purified by being in the presence of the divine. And you say, well, how am I going to be in the presence of God? This is 7,000 years ago. I'm not there now. How can I possibly do this? Krishna is present now through his name. And best by chanting his name in the mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. That is the mantra for this age, Kali Yuga. In earlier times, there were many mantras. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. There were so many more. Many ways in which you could chant his names. But by chanting his names, his name and he are no different. So then you connect with him through his name. You dive deeply into that name and it becomes a constant connection. Over time, as you dive deep into the chanting of that name fills your heart, fills your mind, fills your consciousness, awakens you, and causes you to transform from within without any external effort. But one must be in a mood of submission, of surrender, of being willing to drop the ego. If you want to maintain your pride, your position, your egoic stance, whether you are someone who is a householder or you're a sannyasi, a saint, or a monk, or renunciate, doesn't matter. Ego is ego. Ego doesn't care. It's an equal opportunity offender. It will go after anyone, right? And it will cause you the same illusions that everyone has. It could be the illusion of being in charge of a monastery or an ashram, or it could be in charge of a business or a multi-million-dollar thing. But that ego will eat you up and destroy your spiritual journey. So you have to be very careful. Why does one talk about surrender and submission? Not because God wants us to submit. No, not because he's so arrogant and proud and ruthless that he just wants us to submit to him because he's all powerful and he just wants to dominate us. No. Because submission means only one thing. I'm removing my ego and I'm aligning with the divine will. I'm opening I'm emptying the cup of my being and allowing him to enter and fill me with his presence. That's what it means. And if you understand that, you'll know the power of surrender. That's why Krishna says in the Gita, just surrender unto me. It sounds like an easy thing, but it is the hardest thing to do. Because to surrender, that ego which is in the way needs to be released. That ego needs to be told, hey, listen, buddy, you've had your time. Enough. No more. I am not going to give you the space you need. You can handle my basic functions, but that's about it. Who I am, my identity, is no longer in your hands. I am a servant of the divine. I no longer exist. Only he exists. And that is what matters. I am an insignificant, worthless human being. But my worth is now no longer defined by this. It is defined by my Creator, who is the cause of everything, the source of everything. And I am his and he is mine. And when you have that sense of belonging, that sense of relationship, that kind of love, then it takes over your entire being. Then the ego also becomes quiet. Then the ego gets it. This works better. Oh, I don't need to do anything. I can relax. I can take it easy. So Kaliya continues, you are the omniscient Lord of the universe, the cause of freedom from illusion. Please arrange for us whatever you consider proper, whether it be mercy or punishment. At that time, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was acting the role of a human being, replied, O serpent, you may not remain here any longer. Go back to the ocean immediately, accompanied by your retinue of children, wives, and other relatives and friends. Let this river be enjoyed by the cows and humans. If a mortal being attentively remembers my command to you to leave Vrindavan and go to the ocean, and narrates this account at sunrise and sunset, he will never be afraid of you. Out of fear of Garuda, you left Ramanka island and came to take shelter of this lake. But because you are now marked with my footprints, Garuda will no longer try to eat you. I'm going to explain this part in a moment. There's a backstory here. Kaliya then joined his wives in worshipping Krishna with great joy and reverence. He offered Krishna fine garments, necklaces, jewels, and other valuable ornaments, wonderful scents and ointments, and a large garland of lotus flowers. Having thus satisfied the Lord of the universe, Kaliya circumambulated him, offered him obeisances, and then took permission to leave along with his wives, friends, and children, and went to his island in the sea. The river Yamuna was immediately restored to her original condition, free from poison, full of nectarian water. This happened at the mercy of the Supreme Godhead, who manifested a human-like form to enjoy his pastimes. And then Krishna rose up out of the lake. So all this happened inside the lake. Everybody thought Krishna's drowned, Krishna's dead. He's, been devoured by the snake. But Krishna rose out of the lake, wearing beautiful divine garlands, fragrances, and garments covered by many fine jewels and decorated with gold. When the cowherd people saw him, they all stood up immediately, just like an unconscious person, senses coming back to life. Having regained their vital functions and filled with great joy, they affectionately embraced him. Even the dried up trees came back to life. The cows, bulls, and calves also experienced great pleasure. And Krishna's brother, Balaram, embraced his infallible brother and laughed, knowing well the extent of Krishna's potency. Out of great feelings of love, Balaram lifted Krishna up on his lap and repeatedly looked at him. Mother Yashoda, Krishna's mother, having lost her son and then regained him, placed him on her lap as she cried torrents of tears and repeatedly embraced him. You see the love one can have for God as your own child? Think of that. Think of the fear they had of losing their beloved child. Just like humans do, we all do. But now in this case, instead of loving a mortal child, they were loving God himself. And they had all the emotions, but so much more heightened. The residents of Vrindavan were feeling very weak from hunger and thirst and fatigue. So they all, along with the cows, spent the night on the river bank, lying down there. That night, while the people of Vrindavan were asleep, a great fire blazed within the dry summer forest. The fire surrounded them on all sides and began to scorch them. Everyone woke up, extremely disturbed by the great fire, threatening to burn them. They called out, "O Krishna, O Balaram, this most terrible fire is about to devour us. We take shelter of your lotus feet, which drive away all fear." Seeing his loved ones so disturbed, Krishna, the infinite Lord of the universe, the possessor of infinite power, then swallowed the terrible forest fire. Like so. Completely just swallowed it up. King Parikshit inquired, now this is the backstory, why did Kaliya leave Ramanka Island, the abode of the serpents, and why did Garuda become so antagonistic towards him? So I need to explain to you a little bit about who these characters that we are referring to are. So this is Shukadev talking to Parikshit. The great sage Shukadev is explaining all of these pastimes to the King Parikshit, and King Parikshit is destined to die within 7 days. If you're just joining us for the first time, that's the backstory here. And the backstory about who they're going to discuss is about Vishnu. You'll see him standing on Garuda. Garuda is that large eagle-like character on which Vishnu is standing. He has 8 arms over there. And this is a more close-up picture. And there is another one here. So once you understood this, Vishnu is the, shall we say, the source of Krishna? No, Krishna is the source of Vishnu. Vishnu is within the material world, taking care of the material world. He's the maintainer of the material world. He's also the one from whom the material world actually emanates. But Krishna is the highest because he is the embodiment of the highest frequency called love. Because he is the source of love. And because he is the love that all of us have been looking for. And love is the highest supreme energy of the universe. Now from that love source comes Vishnu, who then takes care of functions within this world. So that Vishnu has a carrier whose name is Garuda. Garuda is sort of an eagle-like bird, and he likes to eat snakes. So all the serpents were in this particular island were making offerings to Garuda. One serpent, however, the arrogant Kaliya, would take all the offerings that were being made. So let me go back a little bit. So Garuda would attack the serpents, right, and eat them. So the serpents made a deal with him that every month they would make an offering of tribute and leave it at the base of a tree to have Garuda's protection. Now, they continued to do that very dutifully, but this arrogant Kaliya would in fact come along and would eat up those offerings before Garuda could claim them. In this way, Kaliya was directly defying Garuda. Garuda, who is very dear to the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, became angry when he heard of this. He rushed towards Kaliya with tremendous speed to kill him. Now, Kaliya, as you know, as you came across earlier, was very powerful and very proud of his power, as usually happens when someone is powerful. And Kaliya, who had sort of a poisonous weapon in his whole, demeanor, raised his numerous heads to counterattack Garuda, showing his ferocious tongues and expanding his horrible eyes. Kaliya bit Garuda with his fangs. Garuda moved with overwhelming speed to repel Kaliya's attack. He struck Kaliya with his left wing, which shone like gold. Beaten by Garuda's wing, Kaliya was extremely distraught and hid in a lake near the river Yamuna. Now, Garuda could not enter this lake or even approach it. There's a backstory to the backstory. The sage Saubhari was at one time meditating in the waters of this lake and had forbidden Garuda to catch fish there. Now, Garuda's an eagle. He likes to catch fish. That's his food. So once being hungry, Garuda took courage and seized a fish from that lake. Just one fish. Come on, not a big deal. But the sage, Saubhari, who was sitting in meditation in the waters of that lake, seeing how all the fish in that lake had become very unhappy at the death of their leader, Saubhari uttered the following curse, believing that he was mercifully acting for the benefit of the fish in that lake. If Garuda ever again enters this lake and eats the fish here, he will immediately lose his life. What I am saying is the truth. Now, these sages had immense power due to their austerities, due to their meditations, due to their immense development in the yogic process. So what they would say would come true. So he said, if Garuda ever enters this lake and eats the fish here, he will immediately lose his life. That's why Garuda could not come there to that lake. That's why Kaliya, who's the only one of the serpents who knew about this, went and hid there. In fear of Garuda, he hid there until a later time when Krishna drove him out. So that's the backstory. All right. So I hope you've enjoyed this particular episode. I hope you've been writing down your questions. Some of you have, and I'm very glad to see that. And I'm excited to read what you all have been writing. And if you haven't, then please write down your comments. I'd love to know what you thought and how this sat with you. I hope you've heard it from the beginning. If you haven't, please go back and watch it again from the beginning, because I introduced the idea back in the beginning. Also know that there are over 80 episodes of the Bhagavatam, starting from the first canto all the way to the 10th canto where we are now. There are 12 cantos in all. And they're all there on the YouTube channel. If you go to Spiritual Wisdom Academy, or if you type in my name, Rohit Juneja, you will find all of them in the playlist called Bhakti, the Divine Love Podcast. You'll find it there. All right, I'm excited to hear your questions, and let's see what you guys have been writing. All right. Hi, Cindy. Welcome to all of you that are here. Thank you for joining us. Just so know that we're broadcasting this every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time and at 10 p.m. Eastern. And we're on YouTube, on Instagram, on X, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, just about everywhere you can watch. So, yeah, Cindy's pretty excited about what we're reading about. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, let's get the first comment that you got here. Ignorance abounds in many ways. This ignorance is vast and causes me much aggravation. What form of prayer do you suggest to put this in a good place? Difficult for me lately. So ignorance definitely puts us into a place that is very painful. Ignorance is the cause of suffering. Once we know something, once we understand something, once we know how to deal with it, we're able to navigate it much better. When we understand this world, when we understand who we are, when we understand why we're here, that knowledge lights up everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. That is the knowledge that we all need to get out of ignorance. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. I offer my respect to my spiritual master who has opened my eyes, the salve of knowledge. Because that knowledge illuminates this world, shows us direction, shows us where we need to go, takes us out of the darkness of ignorance, and helps us navigate through all the miseries of this world. If you think this world is a world of pleasure, then you are living in a delusion. There are pleasures here, no doubt, but they are temporary. And these pleasures often lead to great suffering. So to think that they are going to be lasting or satisfying, or that we're really going to be able to enjoy these pleasures unlimitedly, is a grand delusion. In fact, the more you have, the more painful it is to lose it. And lose it we will. All of us will. No matter how much wealth you have, no matter how young and beautiful you are, no matter how sensual you think you are, no matter what lovely food you have, there comes a time when you can't even taste that food. You can't enjoy it anymore. Sometimes it comes from sickness, sometimes it comes from old age. The things you could eat and enjoy cannot be enjoyed anymore. The things that gave you great pleasure no longer do. It is how things have been created. Why? So that we may come to the realization that we are not this body, that this attempt at finding pleasure is an attempt on our part to try to be God. God is the supreme enjoyer of everything. He creates everything for his own enjoyment. He is the Purusha. We are all Prakriti. We are there to be enjoyed by God. But in our arrogance, we think, no. I want to be the enjoyer. Okay, go right ahead. You're not going to be sent to hell. Don't worry. Go right ahead. You will have to deal with the consequences of the karma, but that's all right. That karma is here and now, or in another life, but it will be something you will deal with. So go ahead and try to enjoy, but the design of this world, if you understand the design, is very deliberate. It is designed to show us that we are in illusion, that we are in ignorance. So once we understand the design, we understand how it works, what works and what doesn't work, then we begin to align ourselves with the master plan. What is the master plan? The master plan is for us to wake up. What does that mean? To wake up, we must understand who we are and who is God. Who is that source that we came from? What is the soul? That's where you read the Bhagavad Gita. You begin with that. Bhagavad Gita, I've got an entire playlist on my YouTube channel. Spiritual Wisdom Academy, as I was mentioning earlier, there's an entire playlist on the Bhagavad Gita. You can, of course, buy a copy as well on Amazon, but read it. And starting with the second chapter is where you'll begin to find the wisdom you need, because it cuts through illusion. It cuts through the illusion in a way that nothing else does. So I encourage you to enlighten yourself with this knowledge. Then practice it, live it. Because it's not enough to just have knowledge. One must embody that knowledge. One must live by that knowledge, because only then will it work. The knowledge is the theory, the concept. Then there needs to be the experiment. That is when you apply it. And then you will see the result. Right? I can tell you that lighting a flame with a match will make that candle burn, but unless you do it, unless you see it, you won't know for yourself. I can tell you a particular restaurant has great food, but unless you go there and taste it, you're not going to know for yourself. You have to experience it. So this knowledge also needs to be lived and experienced. And we don't have to wait for some time to get to some heaven to experience it. No, we can experience it here and now. Here and now you will experience a freedom from suffering, a freedom from your mind, a freedom, because that is the cause of suffering, right here. Once you're free from the clutches of your mind and its distorted perceptions, then even when your body is aging and even when it's going through its own challenges, your mind will not torment you. Your body might, the world might, but those things, the impact will be diminished massively as you no longer fight with them and no longer wish for them to be other than what they are, as long as you no longer identify with either the body or the world, but you identify with that spiritual essence, which is who you really are. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for your comments. I love it. I would love to hear comments from all of you. So as many of you that have comments, either write them now, or if you're watching this later on, feel free to make comments in the, in YouTube or Instagram, wherever you are. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, to comment over there. And if you like the videos, go ahead and put a like so that I get to know how many of you really care about what I'm doing here. So I really appreciate your presence. Thank you. Cindy says, thank you, Rohit. May God, Krishna, bless you in many ways throughout all the days of in our lives. We'll benefit from your teachers. Thank you. Whatever I've learned, really I have learned, is by the grace of God and by the grace of all the gurus and teachers from whom I've learned. I really know very little. I have come across people who are far more advanced and who know far more. So I'm just a little tiny cog in the wheel, trying to share the little bit that I do know, that I have understood. Cindy says, love is all that really matters. Indeed, I know and feel throughout my soul and being, I know this to be absolutely true. You are so right. Love is all that ultimately matters. The quality of that love, however, is very important. When that love is tinged with an agenda, then it is not true love. So the attempt of this world, when we say I love you, it is only because I love you because of what you have or what you are, because of the way you look, or because of your money, or because of your security you'll give me, or safety that I'll get, or companionship that I'll get. It's what I can get out of you that makes me love you ultimately. You may be the best person I can get, the best person that I know, but if you stop giving me the things that you gave me, then I might begin to stop loving you. If we used to have fun in the beginning of our relationship, but that fun stops and now it's all hard work and now we've just got to raise a baby, do our jobs, do our this, do our that, very often people fall out of love. So was it love in the first place? If your love can be shaken by the circumstances of changing or growing or living, then was it love? No. Most of the time it was lust. You desired something. You desired someone. That something, that someone, that desire was because of what you were getting from that. When that getting is no longer happening, well then, that which you got, what you call love, now turns to hate. Now you leave this person. Now you move on. Your friends tell you, hey, there's someone better for you out there. And that's how we seem to think love is. But that is kama. Kama means lust, desire. True love is prem. And in prem, that is divine love. That divine love has no beginning and has no end. There is no question of stopping to love. There is no question of leaving or divorcing or abandoning or any of that. Once you fall in love with God, my dear, That is the greatest love of all, and nothing will ever compare to it. Be ready for that. If you want the greatest love of all, you've come to the right place. That is divine love. That is the love we have for God. That is the love for Krishna. I have another lovely comment here, and this is from Bharti. Thank you, Rohit. My mother and I had fallen out of the habit of tuning in on Tuesday evenings after we returned from India. Nice to be back. Thank you. Thank you both for listening in, Rima and your mom, Bharti. Thank you so much for joining me, for having been so loyal and committed all these years. I value all of you that have supported me on this journey and that have encouraged me and given me the strength to carry on. Without you, I could not have done it. Thank you. Really, from the bottom of my heart, I love you all. And I want you to know you are so important to me, all of you. Thank you, all of you, for your wonderful words. Thank you for your beautiful support. And thank you for being here as part of my life. I value all of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. With deepest love and gratitude. I'll see you next week, next Tuesday. Same time, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. And if you're in India, that'll be Wednesdays at 7:30 a.m. All right. And you can convert that to wherever you are in the world. I look forward to seeing you next week.